All right. Do you know what I noticed in like the first couple of years of a generation we're 3.5 years into now? You know what I noticed the first couple of years of this generation? You know what I noticed about the PS4, the Xbox One? We're going to leave Nintendo out of this because they're obviously some sort of weird separate case right now. You know what I noticed? You had probably the most cross-gen games that I've ever seen in a transition to a new hardware generation. Meaning you had games that were on both PS3 and PS4. Kind of pretty far into the life of the PS4/Xbox One, right? I think that stuff was pretty profitable. I think these companies realized that there's a lot of money to be made here. But the thing that you saw by far the most of is you saw games that came out in the past, like the last year, the last couple of years of the PS3 and the Xbox 360 getting HHD ports. Games that were already HD, they were now getting enhanced. The enhanced edition of Tomb Raider, the enhanced edition of Dishonored, the enhanced edition of every fucking game that came out in the last couple of years of the PS3 and the Xbox 360. And it was more than maybe any, like, it's more than I've ever, like, it was shocking. It was shocking. Just a couple of weeks ago, we got the HHD version of Resident Evil 6, a game that looked like shit, probably still looks like shit. Now it's more HD, it's enhanced. And really what it is, you know, I've kind of argued with Nick about, like, why buy these? Just get the PC version. It's going to look better. I mean, the same, if not better, than this one that they're re-releasing. You can get it for $3. Don't buy this. You know, the enhanced edition of DMC. And the thing is, they just keep making them. They're still making them. And I think it's making them a lot of money. People are rebuying these games because they look better. Like Final Fantasy X and X-2, PS2 games. They made HD versions of these games for PS3 and 360, and then they re-released them on PS4 in an even better version. It's even more HD, even more HD. And I think all these publishers and, like, you know, the first party developers are doing it too. You have the Uncharted, you know, Drake collection, you know, play all these games in HD. Look in. Or the Gears of War collection, you know. We're going to re-release it. These things sell. These things sell. I think what people are realizing is, wait a minute, people are going to spend $50, $60 again just to play their game in a slightly, with a better frame rate and a slightly higher resolution. It's 1080p now instead of 900p or 720p. You know what happened, right? It's our fault. We bought these things. Well, I mean, I didn't, but a lot of us did. And you know what's happening? They're realizing that they're going to spend the money on this software that runs slightly better. Why are we waiting 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 fucking years, in the case of Sony, to release our new system? We'll just put out a system now. We'll say it's a little bit better, and sure enough, we can show them footage of the PS4 version of the new fucking Uncharted. Then we'll show the PS 4K version, the not 4K resolution, the NEO. We'll give them a 30 frames per second Uncharted 4, but then we'll show them the 60 frames a second Uncharted 4, and they're going to want to buy our console and all the software for that too, and they may even buy both before they hop on to this new system. Once they finally hop onto this new system. Like we caused this. We caused this. Like they're making cell phones now. They're making cell phones, and what's going to happen is they're going to sell a lot of these because of course they are, right? They're PlayStations, and everyone wants the slightly better version. We proved that when we bought these HD, you know, when we jumped onto the new console just because the same fucking games looked better. When we bought the HD versions of all these fucking games, we proved to them that we're suckers. And we're going to buy these new fucking consoles because what we care about is a slightly better frame rate. Hell, we argue about it all the time, you know, on forums. You know, we say the PS4 is better than the Xbox One because it's got 100 more Ps, right? So they know. They listen to us. They listen to our purchasing habits, and this is why they're doing this. You know? It's unprecedented, right? But like at the same time, the shift from last generation to this generation, what publishers have been putting out, what we've been buying, that's kind of unprecedented too. So now they're like cell phones, and they're just gonna put out a slightly better version, and then, you know, we're gonna buy Uncharted 4, or maybe not Uncharted 4, but like let's say, what's a big game coming out this year? You know, we're gonna buy fucking, you know, No Man's Sky or whatever, you know. We're going to go on the internet. We're going to like, why is my game only running at 24 frames per second? Why? Why is it only working at 24 frames? And someone's going to be like, well, buy the PS4K, the PS4 NEO. It'll run at 60 frames a second. And we're going to be like, but I bought this one. I don't want to have to upgrade. It just makes me angry. It makes me angry because people are going to buy this thing. People are going to buy this thing. And you know what? Games are going to get worse. Or games are going to stay shitty on like the base PS4, the base Xbox One. Because you know Xbox is going to do this too. They're going to stay shitty because we proved to them that we're okay with shitty games. Even when we're not really okay with shitty games, we proved to them because look at 3 of the biggest games last year. Bloodborne, Witcher 3, and Fallout 4. And they all ran like shit on consoles. They all ran like shit on consoles. Sub 30 frames per second. So these publishers are going, well, our games run like shit. They barely work half the time, you know. But people buy them anyways. So let's just sell new hardware. You're going to have some people buy this new, more powerful hardware where the games run better. But you're going to have a lot of people who are just going to put up with these shitty games because, I mean, they did it all last year, right? But in reality, what we're thinking is, fuck you, I don't want to play the inferior version, right? We don't want to play the inferior versions. That's why, you know, people laughed at me when I was like, you know, I'm just going to play the 360 version of the new Tomb Raider because I don't want to buy an Xbox One. Everyone's like, that version doesn't even exist. It's probably not even coming out. Why would you play that one? It's inferior. We've been playing inferior games this whole time. And now Sony and probably Microsoft are going to profit from it. They're basically putting out a system that can kind of run these games like they should be run. Like the PCs run these games these days. They've turned us into PC gamers. We're going to buy the new PS4 like it's the new graphics card. Because no one wants to play the inferior game. And what's the most frustrating part about this is that it didn't have to be like this. It didn't have to be like this. Look at the PS2. That thing was out for 10 fucking years. You know, how long was the PS3 out before the PS4 came around? Or the 360? Like, that hardware didn't really improve over time. It was the same fucking hardware that entire time. But developers, they learn tricks. They learn how to code for these systems and make their games look nicer. And games at the start of the generation, when they're kind of just still figuring everything out and realizing that people are going to buy, you know, games with subpar frame rate because, hey, it's a new generation, you know, we're just still figuring these things out. And then, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the line, games look way better than they did at the start of the generation. You can pull up, like, here. Look, Uncharted. Look. Uncharted, which came out a year after the launch of the PS3. Not a launch title. A year after the launch of the fucking PS... I don't really know how to do this because, you know, who even really knows? There's so much bullshots or whatever. Maybe people in chat can like link me some shit. It's hard to just kind of pull up screenshots on the fly. You have, you know, a 2007 game, right? And then you do the same developer on the same hardware, but years later, they've kind of learned a thing or two. And then you have games that start to look way nicer. Because developers have learned how to work with the hardware. They've learned tricks. They learned how to make games that look nicer, you know? And that's why you look at a game at launch and a game like at the tail end of the generation, and like those games look way better, even though the hardware's the fucking same. They're not... Sony and Microsoft, probably, they don't care about this anymore. Because we proved by buying, you know, all these cross-gen games, by buying all these, you know, HD versions of these games, that we don't want to wait for better frame rates. We'll just buy the hardware and let these developers brute force it. You know, not figure out the hardware. Just give us some new hardware. We're the suckers. And now they're going to start putting out games that run like shit on the regular PS4 and that run fine, probably, on the improved PS4. And the people who've saved up their money, the people who've bought PS4s, God forbid, in the last few months or something, they're just like, fuck you. Fuck you. We're in the graphics card business now. We're in the mobile phone business now. Get with the times and spend some fucking money. And developers, they'll just keep, you know, they'll develop for the best hardware, like PC gamers do. And then you're gonna get some, and the people that have these, you know, original consoles, they're going to get some inferior version that runs like shit or looks like shit or probably both, because I guarantee you a game that is designed solely for a single piece of hardware looks a lot nicer than one that is designed for much better hardware that's just sort of like downported, that's just sort of scaled back on. That process of making a game run okay on shittier hardware, that's not an elegant one. That's not the same as designing a game from the ground up. for that one singular hardware. So games are probably going to start to look worse. That's the reality. You look at cross-gen games. You look at cross-gen games, like after the PS4 came out, or the Xbox One, if you bought the 360 version or the PS3 version of a game, like, those games didn't look nice because they didn't even fucking try. They didn't even fucking try. That's why, I'd say Tomb Raider 2012, the first reboot on 360, actually looks a lot better than Rise of the Tomb Raider on 360, because that was just, which, to be fair, is one of the better cross-gen downports I've seen. But when they were making these games, they weren't making them for the 360 and just sort of like bumping, and bumping up the frame rate, for the newer consoles. They developed them for the new consoles, and then they just did their fucking best to squeeze that onto a fucking dual-layer DVD, to run on crappy hardware, and it looks like shit. And it runs like shit. And I seriously think that that's what's going to happen to the current PS4s, probably the current Xbox Ones. Don't ever buy a fucking console unless you have games that you want to play on it right fucking then and there. I got this Xbox One because I knew that someday Scalebound was going to come out on it, because they said it was exclusive. They said it wasn't coming to PC. Not only is it coming to PC, but they're probably, by the time that game comes out, it's probably going to be out on a better version of the Xbox. And now I have a system that probably only runs the inferior version of that game. And I feel like a fucking sucker. The worst part is that it punishes the fans, like the loyalists, It punishes them. The people early adopters who buy early. And you think that maybe you're okay now? Well, my version's going to run fine. My version's going to run fine. I don't care if the PS4K version runs a little bit better. Like, you say that now, but you've already proven to them that you're not okay. Because we weren't playing, or very few of us were playing the last gen versions of these new games. And you look at sales charts, even though there was, so many fucking Xbox 360s and PS3s out there, and it was the first fucking year of new hardware with the PS4 and the Xbox One, the sales of cross-gen games would still blow last gens out of the water because people didn't want to play those shitty versions. So don't tell me that you're going to be okay playing the shittier version when you see a much nicer looking version out on the market. Because you're not. You've already proven that to yourself and to them. You're going to be pissed off and you're going to buy the new hardware. And they win.